If you're a beginner in the permanent makeup industry and you're just starting to use a machine or you're just starting to learn the machine hairstroke technique, needles can be a really confusing element of the permanent makeup treatment. How do you know which needle configuration to use, what size to use on all the different skin types to get the result that you want? So in this video, I'm going to explain the difference between a 1-round liner, a 3-round liner, a sloped, a flat, and a magnum, what you should be using on what skin type to get the best results. Hi, Kim here from Kim Lloyd Permanent Makeup, where I help you to do two things. 1, become a highly skilled permanent makeup artist, and 2, grow your permanent makeup business. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to click subscribe to be notified of when I post new videos. Now, in today's video, it's for a beginner. So if you're a beginner who's just starting to use a machine or you're just starting to learn the machine hairstroke technique, this video is for you. So when I started to learn a machine, the one thing I found really confusing were the needles. There are so many different types of needles on the market, different configurations, different sizes, different brands, different cartridge designs. It was a really confusing space. I didn't really know what type of needle I should be using to get a specific result. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the main configurations you'll come across. I'll also recommend what I think you should be using as a beginner to get the right result on the right skin type. So sit tight and let's get into the needle explanations now. Okay, so when you're just starting your machine hairstroke journey, you'll come across these 5 needle configurations quite a lot. You'll hear them a lot on the internet when you're searching to buy needles. So we've got a 1-round liner, a 3-round liner, a flat, a sloped, and a magnum. Now you'll hear about these configurations a lot. Can you use all these to create machine hairstrokes? No. A magnum, you cannot. This is where the needles are stacked on top of each other. You cannot create a thin line with a magnum. You can, however, do that with a 1-round liner, 3-round liner, a flat, and a sloped. The reason I've included the magnum on this slide is because some brands call their flats a magnum, when in fact a magnum should be known as stacked needles. So just be careful when you're trying to buy flats. Sometimes they're called magnums. If you're trying to buy a magnum, sometimes you'll get a flat. Now, as a beginner, I'm going to make this really easy for you and tell you that you should only really focus on using a 1-round liner for all your machine hairstroke clients. Don't overcomplicate it for you in the early stages. Just forget about the rest of the needles and just focus on the 1-round liner, because the 1-round liner also comes in various different sizes and shapes and cartridge designs, which is confusing enough on its own. But briefly, let's just talk about the 3-round liner, the flat, and the slope. So the 3-round liner I do occasionally use on very thick oily skin because the configuration of 3 needles tightly packed together captures more pigment and it can make it easier to deposit that pigment into the skin. The flat and the sloped is the same idea. Because there's more needles next to each other, it can suck up more pigment and deposit more pigment into the skin, meaning that you have to go over that patch of skin less and you can deposit pigment quickly. However, the flat and the sloped, it is a more advanced needle to use, so it's actually quite difficult to create nice curved strokes with these needles. I'm experimenting a bit with them now and they're more suitable for like straight hair strokes. The work I tend to do, here's some examples, is very curvy and soft and natural, and I find it quite hard to work with flat and sloped when doing my work. 99% of my work is constructed using a 1-round liner in its various forms. Like I said, occasionally on very thick oily porous skin I will use a 3-round liner to deposit the pigment quickly, but generally I'm just using a 1-round liner. Alright, so 1-round liners also come in various different sizes, ranging from super thin to thick needles. So super thin would be a 0.18 and it stretches all the way up to a 0.45 or maybe even higher, I think. I've never used anything above a 0.38 because I find that creates a very thick stroke and I don't really want to go any thicker than that. Now, In theory, you should use these different needle thicknesses according to the skin type. So in theory, we're told use a thinner needle for thinner skin and a thicker needle for thicker skin. However, I don't find this to be very helpful. The reason being is that I find on very thin, mature, sensitive skin, I find the super thin needles, the 0.18 up to a 0.25, to be too thin and sharp for this skin type, because these needles create very thin strokes. Now, if you're wanting to create impact with your brow work, so you're wanting to have a visible, thicker stroke, to create a thick stroke with a thin needle, you're going to have to work over that patch of skin over and over and over and over and over to get that density of pigment and that thick visible pigment. Now that's going to cause a lot of trauma, which is really bad for thin, sensitive skin. So actually, I like to stay in the mid-range of a 0.30 to a 0.35 for 0.33 for thin, sensitive skin, because that's going to allow me to deposit pigment quicker without having to go over the skin too many passes, so we're minimizing the trauma. On thick skin, I do use a thicker needle, so I go up to a 0.38 for thicker skin. However, I have heard artists say that actually they like to use a thinner needle for thick skin, because they theorize that the thinner needle can penetrate the thicker skin easier because it's sharper, and they can get more pigment in that way. That's not what I found personally, but it's okay to experiment using different needles on different skin type once you understand how they're supposed to work. But the most important thing is that you're causing as little trauma as possible. So diameter is one thing, and then we also need to consider the taper. Now the taper is the length of the bullet shape at the tip of the needle. This can come in extra long, long taper, medium taper, and also a short taper. You won't often find short taper needles in permanent makeup, because it causes a fair amount of trauma to the skin, because it's too short and the needle's too fat, and it just causes the skin to open up too much. So generally we're working with a long taper or a medium taper. The theory being that a medium taper, because it's the surface is a bit fatter, can deposit pigment quicker in the skin. The long taper deposits less pigment and causes less trauma to the skin because it's sharper, it's more pointier at the end. So I use longer tapers for thinner, sensitive skin because it's causing less trauma, because it's more pointed, it's less flat. And I use the medium taper for normal to oily skin types, because we want to deposit as much pigment as possible into those skin types, and that skin can hold up to a medium taper, which causes a bit more trauma to the skin. Now, once we've understood the dimensions of the needle and we've got the taper of the needle, we also have the design of the cartridges, which we need to consider as well. Now, there's two stark contrasts between two particular brands in mind, which is the Quadron and the Vertex. Now, these are my two favorite brands that I use a lot, and I use them to create different types of strokes on my client's skin. So the Quadron I use for soft, airy strokes. Thicker strokes, because it's got a flexible needle, is able to create that thick, airy, pixelated stroke. And the reason it's flexible is because it's got this larger opening at the tip, so the needle can move around a bit more within the cartridge, which enables you to do shading techniques quite nicely. The Vertex Pico, or the Vertex, I use for really crisp strokes, thinner strokes. It's got a very rigid needle that really doesn't move because the opening at the tip is really tight. So the needle is very rigid. So you would struggle to create these airy, light, thick strokes with the Vertex Pico. But these really thin strokes are easily done with the Vertex Pico. So here's some examples of clients I did recently. So here I've used the Quadron. On her I wanted to do a nice, thick, airy hairstroke technique. And on this client, I wanted to keep them really tight and crisp. So you can really see the visual difference between the same size needle, but a different needle cartridge. So to conclude, as a beginner, I would suggest that you just stick with a 1 round liner from size 0.30 up to a 0.35. Buy 2 different brands. You can use a Quadron for soft, airy, thicker strokes, and get your Vertex Picos for thin, crisp strokes. Use a medium taper for thicker skin, and use a long taper for thin, sensitive, mature skin. So I hope that's helped you to understand needles a little bit more today. You might still be a bit confused because there is so much to learn as a beginner, but these are the basics, so I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions at all about needles, please put them in the comments below and I'll do my best to respond as soon as possible. If there's anything else you want me to cover on any other topic, also put that in the comments and I'll do my best to record a video just for you. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and you will be notified of when I post my next video. So I'll see you in the next one.